Walmart employees, what's the worst thing you have seen inside your store? Not an employee, but a very frequent Walmart shopper. All the Walmarts around me are pretty nice. Never seen anything nasty going on. But there was an incident once that still sticks with me to this day point. When I was younger, my mom had to grab meds at Walmart in the middle of a storm. It wasn't a bad storm or anything, just very rainy with some thunder, but it was supposed to continue for several days, so of course the store was packed. So we were in line at the in-store pharmacy, and there was a man who was clearly mentally disabled, with a helper, in the front of the line. The man between us and them was this dude who in my young mind must have been a lawyer, did not fit the stereotypical Walmart look at all, wearing an expensive looking suit, perfectly gelled hair, literally carrying a briefcase. He looked annoyed that he was there at all. He intensely reminded me of Patrick Bateman, just an air of disinterest and arrogance, and was brushing his coat off every time anyone walked too close to him. Point everything's fine, and the guy and his helper at the front of the line get their prescriptions and start to turn around. Just as they do, there's a huge thunderclap and suddenly, the power goes out in the store. It's not pitch black, but it's dark as hell, and immediately there's commotion in line. I look up just in time to witness disabled man punch a lawyer dude square in the face. Point lights flicker, come back on. Lawyer man is standing there holding his bloody nose looking like he's ready to murder someone. Disabled guy is freaking out. The helper is profusely apologizing and trying to help the lawyer guy. Lawyer guy waves him off with a glare, walks to the front and calmly says his name plus info and throws down some money. Pharmacist hands him a prescription, which he snatches wordlessly and turns away, brushing past me still holding his nose, leaving a trail of blood on the linoleum floor. I don't know why, but the entire thing felt so surreal. I still remember it like it just happened. Wildest thing I've ever seen in Walmart. Other than the people freaking out and throwing shit, and one junkie who continuously stole cans of compressed air for dusting computers, to do whippets in the handicapped bathroom. How that didn't kill him, I still don't know. One story stands out. Point this elderly obese woman came in with her service dog, a little chihuahua or something, probably for anxiety. Gets one of the electric scooters, puts the dog with its leash into the basket. During the course of her shopping, the leash goes through the grate of the basket onto the floor and gets run over by the wheels of the scooter. The leash gets twisted up in the motor of the scooter. Eventually, the leash gets yanked tight and begins to strangle the dog. The dog uses what little air it has to panic, but quickly falls silent. The woman does nothing about this. Once she gets to the front of the store, she decides to check on the dog, strangled to death 6 inches in front of her. She flips shit and screams at every employee she can find, telling them to do something, save her dog. I guess she didn't know it was dead. It was their fault, blah blah. The dog had been dead for almost 20 minutes before she decided to check on it. And shit all over the inside of the cart that she didn't manage to notice or smell for 20 faking minutes. I no longer work at Walmart. I unfortunately have no idea whether she sued or not, or what really came of it afterwards. I was an overpass manager at the time. The store is located in the shittiest area of a major city at a 24-hour store. At around 2 AM the overpass loss prevention associate had just caught a guy shoplifting on the cameras, and I had been called up to help him. Things go smoothly. The guy had stolen less than $50 worth of stuff and compiled, so it went pretty easy. Point. After letting the shoplifter go, the loss prevention associate had some paperwork to do, so I jumped on the cameras to see what's going on in the store. Point. I soon find a shady looking individual lurking around the electronics department. He's clearly making sure no one is in the vicinity watching him. He sneaks into an aisle and grabs an all-in-one monitor/desktop combo wrapped in spider wrap. I still don't know why a $1,000 plus computer wasn't locked behind a cage. He quickly takes it to a different aisle, easily works the spider wrap off the box, takes the computer out, and shoves it into his sweat pants, slinking over into the clothing racks and apparel. He hides the computer in some pants and sneaks around for the next 15 to 30 minutes trying to watch the employees up front by the registers. At this time of night only our cigarette aisle is open. All of a sudden, while watching a blonde lady in our only open register line crouched behind a rack of shirts, he pulls out his dick and starts wanking it. Then he wiped himself clean on a shirt that was hanging in front of him. At this point we know we don't want to deal with him at all, so we call the cops. Well, as soon as he finished cleaning off, he heads back to where he hid the computer, puts it back in his pants, and starts to head our way. We realized he was going to get to us before the cops, so as soon as he passed our last point of sale we headed out of the monitoring room and confronted him. It is here that I should mention that we are supposed to be a hands-off store, as in if we confront a shoplifter we are supposed to stop them with words. But at this location in the middle of the night everybody's a runner. Obviously this guy decides to run. We tackle him and pin him to the ground. Luckily soon after the police showed up and we let them handle him from their point. Edit. Change student to sudden. At the time of this story I was an overpass manager. While I was walking my rounds I had an associate come up to me and tell me that a customer told him to get the fuck away from me or I'll kill you beach, and that he was headed towards the hardware department. She gave me a quick description: headphones, hoodie, white guy. I radioed the overpass asset protection guy so he could locate him on camera and headed out to find him. I see someone matching his description facing the other was down an aisle in hardware and I go to confront him. He turns around and he's holding a faking hatchet. I keep my distance and ask him to leave. It's then that I realize that he's talking to himself. His conversation with himself is very conspiratorial in nature. With my limited knowledge on the subject I have always thought that he was acting like someone in the middle of a strong schizophrenic episode might, and he scares the crap out of me. I quietly radioed someone to call the cops and to let them know about the hatchet. They picked up a few things and headed to the registers while I followed him from 20 feet back. We opened a register just for him and things went smoothly from there. He left the hatches at the register, but I continued to follow him from there. As he got to the front door a line of cops confronted him with assault rifles and shotguns out and ready. He complied and it ended as well as I could have hoped. Got two different ones from when I worked in the wonderful Wally World. Once, a customer took a child, who we later found out to be his young stepdaughter, into the family bathroom and was spanking her. He was hitting her so hard and she was crying so loud that a coworker heard and knocked on the door. She told the man he couldn't do that in the store and he needed to stop. The man starts cussing at her and just takes the kid and leaves. Fast forward a few minutes and his girlfriend/wife, the child's mother, comes looking for my coworker with her other teenage daughter in tow. She starts screaming in my coworker's face, saying that my coworker had hit her husband in the face. Things are escalating and a crowd has grown at this point, including one of our department managers and one of our managers trying to break up the situation, both women. Well, the mother decides she has had enough and tries to attack my coworker who had confronted her husband. My manager was having none of that and grabbed this woman by the arms and forced her into the shelves 15 feet away and pinned her there. The teenage daughter becomes enraged by seeing her mom and proceeds to attack my department manager. She was more successful than her mother though. She left 4 3-inch claw marks down my department manager's face before she was restrained. Second, a guy was seen running towards the restroom. Moments later he comes out vomiting up blood everywhere. Literally, no exaggeration, a puddle of blood roughly 6 feet wide. No idea how much was in the bathroom. Had to call an ambulance for the guy and called a hazmat cleanup crew to get rid of the blood. This was also right around the time of all those Ebola outbreaks and everyone was freaking out. I've never seen so much blood in my life. Wash it. By worst, what do you mean? Worst, a customer has done that I witnessed. Either the woman who let her son ride a motorized cart immediately hit a pickle shelf, saw me rounding the corner to make sure everyone was okay, and snatched her kid off saying he'll take care of it. Come on. Or the guy who cusses at me, my direct supervisor, and 3 other managers, plus a random lady, because we don't carry Bud's best cookies. I laugh now at the way he exclaimed, I thought this was a gross air store, in a deep south accent. Worst I haven't seen but discovered. If you break something, either let us know, or put it somewhere visible. It's faking disgusting to grab a thing of spaghetti sauce that cracked a while back and now has a layer of green sheet on it. Point similar to that. The worst DC distribution center, basically the warehouse, has done is left sheet clearly unusable for us. Cat food with a lid bent open. Yup, and it had maggots by the time we got it. Cramming pallets in a truck, even if you just stacked cases of salsa in there, gonna smell real nice by the time it gets to the store. But the worst I've seen a manager do is probably when my roommate was cut in the deli. Long story, I tried to hide details for personal privacy. Point basically, my friend A works production in the deli. Customer asked for sliced pepperoni, but only this brand is way too small to cut on a deli slicer. A turns them away, as per her instructions. Manager P comes up and asks A to slice the pepperoni. A refuses but eventually caves, winds up cutting a good gash through her hand, between thumb and wrist. I was unloading our truck in the back when she got pulled to the office and only saw she had some paper towels pressed in her hand. An hour later, she came out of the office and found me on the floor. Apparently, she had to call my fiance for a ride to the airport. Fiance gets there right as I go on lunch. We talk while they finish up paperwork in the back. P comes out with A and informs us that as it's a Walmart injury, P will have to drive to the and my fiance can follow if she chooses. P forgets the damn they have to go to, so she calls the store manager again to figure this out. A finally lights a cigarette, at which point I notice she doesn't even have a damn band-aid, just more paper towels pressed against her hand. As P is on the phone, another manager comes out to inform us that we can't smoke that close to the entrance, while casually leaning on the ashtray thing right by the door. During this delay, I learned that they didn't actually start paperwork for A until my fiance got there. Beforehand there was pretty much nothing but panicked calls to the store manager about where to go. A winds up with 3 stitches. Luckily no nerve damage or anything serious as the final what the fuck of this story. Apparently P drove straight past the first time, and my fiance had to call A to tell her to turn around. So to recap, A was told to ignore safety protocols by P, wound up getting injured, and spent 2.5 hours watching manager scramble to cover their ass before helping her. Fiance made a 30-minute drive to be told she couldn't drive her up there. Don't get me wrong, I fucking love this job. Even stupid customers I deal with, but a lot of the managers I loathe with a deep passion. I was never a Walmart employee, but my first job was at Cinemark Theaters. We weren't in the best place in town, and every so often we would get absolutely insane customers or events that would leave you in disbelief. Essentially we were the Walmart of theaters. This is one of those events I still shake my head at. 16 years later I'm working at the snack bar with about 10 other people. Both lines are open, and customers are getting antsy to not miss the beginning of their movies. It's opening weekend for Harry Potter or Lotta. I can't recall which. All of a sudden, a guy taps me on the shoulder as I'm refilling one of the bulk candy bins, and with wide eyes, tells me that someone took a sheet in the men's bathroom, and that it's the worst he's ever seen. My supervisor is there, and nods her approval, and I hustle down to the bathrooms, while she continues restocking. By the time I get to the bathrooms, which were only a few dozen meters away, I knew something was very, horribly, wrong. People were looking at me with deer in the headlights looks. Children were being shooed away from me as I stride forward to take control of the situation with my mop, bucket, and a few towels and cones. What greeted me was more awful than I could have imagined. The disabled person stall was disabled, to say the least. Runny ploopy sheet covered the entire seat, down the front. The backsplash was completely sploshed, and it was on the faking ceiling. It covered the floor, and was coming out from under the stall wall. Whoever the poor soul was that had been inflicted with Montezuma's revenge had gotten it in his hands, because it was on the latch handle and stall door. The place reeked of something worse than death, and the putridity caused me to nearly puke. I dashed out, shutting the door, and decided the $6.25/HR I was making was not worth me cleaning it up, and set a out of order sign in front of the door. I decided that I would quit before I cleaned that sheet up, and went to my sup who, after seeing the scene, backed me up 100% to the assistant manager. The assistant manager saw it, and after conferring with the general manager, made a call to the contracted custodial company for a priority visit ASAP. Bar none, the most horrific thing I've seen with my own eyes. Apologies for the formatting in advance. On mobile. Not an employee, but a frequent shopper at my local Walmart. The weather has been bad recently, wet and slick, so they had those thick rubber mats in the entryway. As I was walking in, an elderly female employee was walking out. My foot happened to catch on the edge of the rubber mat, causing it to lift suddenly. I hear a short "oh" behind me and turn just in time to see this poor lady spin, fall, and land on her hip. I immediately went down to see if she was okay, expecting the worst. She was unable to regain her feet and said the pain was getting bad. So I told her to hang on while I ran in to find someone. One of the customer service employees brought out a wheelchair while another called the paramedics. I helped lift her into the chair and brought her inside, holding her hand the whole way. They told her the ambulance was coming, but she was concerned that she wouldn't be able to let her husband know what had happened. Turned out her husband worked at the same factory where I worked and was on shift. After I got her name and her husband's name, I called directly to the floor supervisor's phone and relayed the message. I stayed with her until the ambulance got there, still holding her hand. She thanked me for staying with her and contacting her husband, but I still felt horrible for a while after. Happy ending though, she recovered and ended up retiring. This isn't anywhere near as bad as most of the others, but working at Walmart has made me obligated to share my experiences when possible. I'm an asset protection customer host. I stand at the entryway and check receipts. I've been doing this for about 2 months now. Many people do not like me because they think I'm accusing them of stealing. I've actually caught quite a few products due to cashier errors, not so many from self-checkout. Then again, it's a smaller store in a milder community. But there are still a lot of angry people. Some of my favorites. You're a faking joke, you know that? This whole thing is a faking joke. Go home, you faking joke. Older lady who may or may not have been on drugs. A cashier forgot to scan the 24-pack of Dr. Pepper on the bottom of a man's cart. Furious, he demanded that the cashier be the one to scan it and check him out again. However, this is in the middle of the 5 o'clock rush, so all of our registers are full and busy. When I suggested that I would help him at self-checkout, he nearly exploded. He grabbed the Dr. Pepper out of his cart, basically threw it at me, and screamed, "I don't want this anymore. Train your faking employees right." A cashier used the quantity key wrong and only scanned one storage box instead of the 12 the customer had. When I pointed this out to him, he started raging. The cashier scanned it. I'm not stealing it. I tried to assure him that no, I was not accusing him of stealing. I was just trying to rectify a cashier mistake. The cashier made the faking mistake. I should just get the rest for free. He did eventually buy the remaining 11 at the self-checkout point. There was a couple obviously on drugs that I saw were acting suspiciously at the self-checkout. The SC host was busy helping another customer, so he couldn't intervene, and I didn't have a large enough window to leave my post. When I asked to see their receipt, the lady replied, "Legally, I'm not obligated to show anything to you." Which is true, because I'm just an associate and not a salaried manager, but please don't make my job difficult. This took place at about 9:30 p.m., which means there was only one salaried manager on the clock. When I reported this incident to him, he said, "I'm too busy to check the cameras." That made me feel important. A mom was letting her kid carry their receipt. I asked to see it, and the kid started to hand it out to me, but the mom grabbed her kid's wrist and snarled at me, "You don't need to see it." The kid asked, "Why not?" "Because I said she doesn't." My personal favorite, "Sir, can I please see your receipt?" "No, thank you." But the app manager had been watching cameras, and as soon as he walked through the first set of doors, the guy stopped, and the manager found a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't on his receipt. That was fun. Former employee. I worked at a Walmart in San Diego for about 2 years. This story is somewhat gruesome. I worked in the backrooms as a stoker, truck unloader and occasional cart pusher. One of our storage areas was an enclosed open-air yard where we kept most dry goods, chemicals, toys, etc. Animals would sometimes get into that area, but they were never a problem. One time a female cat got into the storage yard and had her litter there. The shift before mine said they could hear the little kittens all around the yard, but could never actually find them. They looked under and between the stacks of pallets and merchandise, but eventually gave up their search and started their work of carrying out pallets of goods to the sales floor. Very unfortunately, they discovered where the kittens were when they drove their pallet jacks under a certain section of goods and crushed several of the kittens. They didn't even realize they had killed the kittens until a few of them saw that their jacks were trailing bloodstains. I started my shift a few minutes after all this happened, and, by the looks of it, 3 pallet jacks had run over kittens, leaving blood, fur and guts behind them, and a large stain where the kittens had hidden under the merchandise. The crew of course stopped when they noticed and looked for more kittens. 3 more were found alive and adopted by sales floor employees. Other than that, it was mostly people pupping in the aisles. It was almost always little kids or elderly, though. But still, it wasn't like they suffered an accident and soiled their trousers. They would literally stop, drop their pants and squat to take a sheet. My store manager. This was 20 years ago, and my first real job. I had been there for a while. I've always been the type or person to learn as much as I can about the place I'm working at, especially when dealing with the public. I don't want to look like an idiot for not knowing something. Anyway, I was covering a lunch for someone in another department, layaway, I think. I needed help from a manager because I didn't know how to do something. I get the store manager and she says she's busy and can't help me. I explain to her what's going on and she just gives me attitude. I tell the customer they'll have to come back in a bit when the person is back from lunch. This was at the end of my shift, so after this I punch out and walk to the front to vent at one of my friends. I said the store manager was being a bitch for giving me attitude and not helping with the customer. Even though this was just Walmart, I still take pride in my work, so 19-year-old me was pretty pissed off. I was also very unobservant as a store manager was right behind me listening to me call her a faking bitch. She asked me if there was something wrong, and I turn around a bit shocked. I repeated myself more professionally and voiced my frustration with her lack of help. The surprising part is that I was not disciplined at all. I'm guessing she knew I was right, and if I bitched to a corporation, she'd lose her job. I walked out of that shithole a few months later. One manager was all over me to stay in my department since it had a cash register and someone had to be close to prevent theft. Literally 2 minutes later, the head cashier calls me and says I need to go up front to help out with long lines. This was the latest in a long line of shitty things management had done, and the lack of them communicating with each other was obnoxious. This conversion happened a few times prior. I just walk in back, punch out, and leave to never return. Management in retail stores sucks. 2.5 years at Walmart in rural northern Nevada before I was termed for poor attendance. It was my first job, and toward the end I was miserable, in tears every day running 4+ departments. When I was hired for electronics, photo until they took it out, 2 Black Fridays, 2 Burning Mans, to Christmas seasons running layaway and online orders. Almost solo was enough. I should have quit long before I started calling in rather than go to work, but I was still such a child. Where do I start? Drunk man threatened to cut my trainer into pieces because we couldn't put clothes on layaway. Silly string up and down the toy aisles regularly. Puke and sheet in the back of the store regularly, and an amount of blood that deserves honorable mention. Bags of frozen seafood left outside the freezers in odd places, no longer frozen, and stinking to high heaven. Screamed at by an old man over a cordless phone. Actually basically yelled at for anything you do, because one person once waited on hand and foot, while the other wants you to go away. The Burning Man dust. Oh my god. Also the contact high from that much collective drug use in the place at once. Mine are actually pretty tame lol. The grossest stories I have are from a truck stop in the same town. TLDR from the truck stop is bis. So much bis. Edit. Seasonals is not the word I was looking for. Also on mobile. Can't fix the layout right now. How does anyone pick just one story? Former employee, only did 3 years. So much point agitated as Hole drops 24 packs of Pepsi from shoulder height from the backside of the register. When I opened it up, he was pretty close to 6.5 feet tall and had only been waiting a minute. It was almost midnight, and I only opened the register because 4 people, including him, came to check out at the same time. Point group trying to return $400 in small, almost certainly stolen health and beauty products. They were a group known to loss prevention, but hard to catch, then being called racist when I denied the return. I'm white. They're black. Always the same people. Always loved calling the black manager to deal with them. They got so deflated and couldn't leave fast enough. Point Jude that wasn't happy with being allowed to exchange a damaged $400 item because he didn't have his receipt. So I denied giving him cash back. So he went and got his exchange item so we could process the exchange, then promptly launched it and the cart into the service desk. He knew he screwed up and promptly grabbed the new item and booked it out the doors. He broke it on the way out. Point dirty old fat guy with his belly hanging out his shirt that pissed himself going through the store. Riding a store scooter. Group of people with fake receipts returning stolen merchandise. Hard to catch because they used real transactions from other stores to create receipts that our system could actually look up. Doesn't show items that were purchased, only the total and some other pertinent information like register number, store number, etc. Dude goes into the changing room, leaves the stuff he doesn't want on the do not want pile. Has hidden his sheet-soaked underwear in a pile with all the clothes he was trying on, which has now contaminated nearly $1,000 worth of clothes. I'm sure there's more. After a while you start to just filter some of it out. HMM. There was a time our LP officer, an off-duty cop, hauled a hooker out of the bathroom wearing 15 pairs of underwear. There was the old guy in a motorized wheelchair who would try to smuggle meat out by sliding it down the back of his chair. He would always argue that it was going to go bad anyways, since he was stealing the manager's special stuff. There was a really fat guy who would do the same by hiding stuff in his rolls. Cannot be unseen. There was the guy with the colostomy bag, completely full, griping that we didn't have a 24-hour pharmacy. I felt bad for him. He had been in an accident, but it was pretty gross, and he was being a real asshole about it. Point there was, in keeping with the theme of this whole thread, the trail of sheet leading from the pharmacy to the door. I don't know if they came in constipated and the laxatives kick in faster than they thought, or with diarrhea and the drugs work faster than I thought, but it was my first literal I don't get paid enough to deal with this sheet moment. There was the time we opened the bottom of the shelves to dust underneath. Pro tip, don't. Same goes for inside the self-checkout machines. There was the guy who brought in a leaking ink cartridge in his bare hands, insisting that he needed to return it so he could buy the right one. Pretty sure he swiped it from a kinkus. There was the literal wall of Hispanic women who didn't speak a lick of English trying to use the self-checkout with those little electric toy cars. IDR what they're called. I guess they were the hot item that year on Black Friday. For some reason they sent me, the 20Y/O guy, to the front door and left the poor pregnant girl to deal with them. Felt bad for her, but also kinda glad I could escape that madness. There was the guy who was stalking one of our cashiers. Poor girl had to have the police officer escort her to her car for a while. Point saw way too many families come in with multiple food stamp cards to buy multiple cards worth of groceries at 1 AM. As soon as the money hits their card, I have a sneaking suspicion that they had bought the cards from someone else and were trying to drain it when the next payment hit before the person could report it stolen. But I don't know. Not my circus, not my monkeys. They could have had the cards legitimately. Point there was a lot more. I really hated my time at Walmart, but it really taught me a lot of empathy. As a middle class kid in the 90s, I wasn't really exposed to that kind of crap until I had to work a shitty minimum wage night job for a year. I wouldn't ever willingly go back, but it did make me value my desk job a lot more. I have a goddamn chair. I would have killed for one of those when I was a cashier. I've seen terrible things working for Walmart, but the one I remember involved a bird stuck in the automatic door. I brought a new load of carts into the GM side. I was heading to the front of them to grab the mountain of strays idiots leave in the front instead of putting them back. I looked down at the exit as a tiny brown dot caught my eye. It was a tiny little bird. I jumped at that door and slammed the off switch. The poor thing got its little leg jammed under the hinge at the back point. I tried to get it out myself, but it was in such a position that if I'd pulled it the leg would break. It was terrifying. I called for help over the radio, but was met with silence. So, I tried to gently pull it out. No deal, it was stuck there. I looked around, and a crowd had formed. I asked for help, but was immediately asked why the fuck I closed the door by this fat beach in an electric cart. Looking right at the stuck bird point thankfully, before I could give a response one of my CSM happened to be coming through, to see what the fuck was going on with the crowd. She immediately pushed the door open, so the hinge would move out of the way. Before she even got an inch open the fat beach drove right over my CSM's toes. Screaming about how we were idiots for caring about the bird more than her. Best part is that my CSM was visibly pregnant point anyway. After she left we got a few volunteers to help and I managed to get the poor thing out of the door. Gave it a look and nothing seemed broken point something I noticed after by the way, the bird started to nip at me when I started to help it. By the time I got it out it had willingly let me hold it. I really hope it realized that I was trying to help it point. I let it go a few feet from the store and these two guys freaked the fuck out at me randomly tossing a bird into the air. Not technically inside, but just a couple of short stories from my cart pushing days. We often kept personal items in the far back of the cart room, where customers can grab carts after entering the store. Jackets, drinks, sometimes food, not allowed technically, gloves, extra pairs of shoes even. I kept my sketchbooks back there, since I didn't have a locker in the back, so I could draw on breaks. One day I'm pushing a row of carts in the room, and my buddy who works with me runs up to me in a panic. I ask him what's wrong, and he tells me some elderly couple came and took my books, because they looked so nice. I drew some wild shit my dudes, and this was back in my rebellious satanist phase, where I was an edgy little faker. I tracked down this old couple, who have now realized there's like naked goat demons and shit in there, and threw the books into the parking lot. I'm grabbing them up, and they're yelling at me about some damnation shit. This was semi-rural Western NC, and telling me I shouldn't be selling books like that. Apparently their grandkids like anime, and they thought they had manga and shit in them, because I had drawn a cartoonish character on the front. They were just really confused. I never brought my sketchbooks to work after that point. Warning, this one is really bloody and upsetting. Another story, parents really like teaching their kids to drive in big parking lots, which would be fine if it weren't a busy Saturday at the front of the store with pedestrians. This little old lady came cruising out of the store, possibly looking forward to a beach-in night of bingo with the gals. Ran in her little cart along on the stretch of striped walkway just outside the doors. Wham! Hit by a fucking Karen mobile minivan. Blood pooling by her head, eyes fluttering and mouth gaping, rolling back and forth twitching on the pavement. 911 is called, an ambulance is coming. Karen and her shitty kid stand by waiting for the police, talking to management. The kid is like 16, sipping a caramel McCafe frappe, and just looks bored. Everyone's rushing around, putting towels near this lady's head, but we don't want to move her in case we accidentally hurt her more. Honestly, she was probably just dead, and rolling the credits. Kept saying weird gibberish. It was faking shocking, and Karen's just beaching that the parking lot isn't easy to maneuver in, and she and her son never saw the lady when she was literally on a marked part of road for walking, in the middle of the area with plenty of space to see her. I didn't get to see the whole thing. The store was pretty much blocked off, and we didn't have room to put carts in. Paramedics arrived and I went to break and tried to wipe my mind of that poor lady. The bloodstain stayed in the parking lot for like a week after. People are faking garbage. A few I remember from my days. Kid, maybe 5 years old, jumping up and down yelling, "Mommy, mommy, can I have $1?" Mother replies, "You can take that dollar and shove it up yours." Kids in toy department screaming. Mom says, "Don't make me do this. Don't make me do this." Reaches into purse, pulls out beer, and proceeds to chug it. Frantic guy comes up and says, "Where's my kid? Where's my kid?" We find kid in cart, maybe 4 years. Old in cosmetic debt. Old Division 1 store that had a perfume counter and sealed off cosmetics section. Cart by register. Mother near back of aisle. Husband starts screaming at mother, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" or something. Husband closed hand punches a helpless kid in the cart, grabs wife and says, "You see that? This happens again, that happens to you." Couple immediately leaves the store. Everyone was too in shock to know what to do. Black Friday lady rides around on a motorized cart and proceeds to puke several of the poles. Gets her boyfriend deals, cashes out and tells the cashier to call maintenance and says what poles she puked by. Customers put a dead roadkill deer in a bag in a cart in the parking lot and tried to make it look like a dead human body. Not bad, but utterly stupid. Guy comes in at like 10:30. We closed at 11. Goes, "Do you carry gas supply lines for dryers?" I reply, "No, just water hoses for washers." Guy grabs one and says, "That'll do." This was roughly 3 years ago when I still worked there. I was working a closing shift and was going for my lunch around 7 or 8 in the evening. Before clocking out and grabbing my dinner from the fridge, I went to the washrooms at the back of the store just near the entrance to the back room/staff area. Now if you've ever gone to the washroom in a Walmart, sometimes they can tend to have a bit of a stank from time to time. Yeah, I know from general bathroom usage. Working there for as long as I had been, I built a bit of a tolerance to it and never really noticed it. But on this fateful day I walked into a smell worse than any I'd experienced in my time there. Now me being a dumbass think to myself, okay, something's wrong, let's investigate. I walk in covering my nose from the raunchy smell wafting its way out of the bathroom and check the first stall. All good. Looking through the door of the other stall, which is a larger handicap accessible stall, to see the one thing I'd been hoping to not end up finding, even though it was exactly what I should've expected. A giant pile of sheets smack dab in the middle of the floor on top of what looked to be Xbox video game cases. Thoroughly disgusted, I made my retreat and called down one of the managers and explained the horrors contained within the stall. They had one of the maintenance people, whose day I can't imagine how badly I'd ruined, come clean up the mess with the proper supplies for dealing with human excrement. The manager came to talk to me and thank me for pointing it out and explained what happened. Turns out someone grabbed a whole bunch of the really cheap video games they leave out of the locked cabinet, took them into the washroom, took out all the discs leaving the empty cases on the floor, and proceeded to pop a squat and unleash hell upon the discarded empty cases. Thankfully I never experienced anything worse than that, if it's even possible. First of all, shout out to my r/Walmart boys. I've worked in a pretty nice Walmart in a smallish town for the past 5 to 6 months, so nothing gross or crazy happens, such as people just shitting in aisles or straight up dying. But I do remember one time I was changing the tires on someone's truck, and just before my coworker and I could lift it, I glanced into the bed. Up against the side wall of the bed is a dead opossum. At first glance I didn't know what it was other than something furry. I couldn't see a face, so I looked closer and saw the skinny tail. I ask my coworker to look, and he discovers that not only is it a dead opossum, it's a headless opossum. Its fur was matted and wet, so I assume the guy just picked it up off the side of the road and was planning on making a hat or something. Never had the chance to ask the owner, but it was pretty interesting to see something like that. At it. Remembered another story from my stalking days. I was casually stalking my assigned department for the night when 2 other associates come over from Pets, which is a nice site of my department, and says, "Dude, a box of canned dog food is busted and it smells like shit. Check it out." I walk over, and behind 2 normal boxes of weight dog food cans is the same product, but with a large gash in the back of it, and dog food leaking out with maggots crawling around in it. The smell was the closest thing to a rotten death sheet I've ever smelled in my entire life. With a short gag and a Walmart speed walk, I dipped back to my department. Thankfully, our supervisor at the time was the best and willingly cleaned up the shelves and tossed the box of dog food. Ex-employee of about 9 months. I have a few stories. I didn't catch the perps for any of these incidents. Just to note, I worked in Produce Wonder Bread, a love story. I was working in the back, and I was the only one in the department, sorting through rotten vegetables and such. I heard an announcement over the intercom, "Maintenance to the produce department." I went to the floor and couldn't find the spill, the most usual culprit of a call. The guy from maintenance came by about 30 seconds later saying, "You've got to be kidding me." I didn't know what was going on, but someone from the bakery next called, found out that a man had vigorously pleasured himself in the processed bread section. I say vigorously, because there was no way that much semen came out of just one time. The man wasn't caught, and the rest of the department had the same reaction as we did, the mixture between absurd disgust and laughing because we didn't catch him too. The man in the shed point I was stacking banana boxes in the back as I heard an alarm go off from a shoplifter going to the parking lot. This was a rather common occurrence, so I elected to ignore it and continue my work. The alarm turned off, no codes were called, so the supposed altercation must have ended. There was a staff meeting later on that night. We discussed what each department's goals were, what each associate needs to look out for, etc. The security guy came in saying the perp had thrown a weight at the glass gun case from Sporting Goods, grabbed a bunch of guns, then ran out. 2 weeks later, he was found living in a shed at the store next door with even more firearms. Honestly, the worst thing I saw working at Walmart was the absolute garbage leadership. I don't like to spread bad things about places I've worked, but holy shit, I can't find many good things to say about this company. I was Cap 2 for those who know. If you're Cap, you feel the pain too. I worked for the company from June 2017, leaving my small grocery gig in favor of WM's better pay just 2 weeks ago. I have never in my life seen a more toxic leadership culture, and I'm not the only one that's seen it. I unfortunately have many stories of bad management, unsafe practices, retaliation for whistleblowing, sexism, broken laws, etc. But there is one story in particular that sticks out, and is both the most angry I have ever been, and the most fulfilling I have ever gotten out of helping somebody when they needed it. We had a new manager come in at one point, and he was fine at first. Then, I had to take a couple weeks off for some military training. Entire other story there about how the management tried to break the law and then cover it up when I called them out on it up to the regional level. I fought up to the home office and won. When I got back from training, the guys at work were all on edge and they absolutely hated this guy. I thought he can't be that bad, since he was fine a month ago. He was worse. He would randomly send people home or discipline them if they didn't agree with everything he said. He changed our schedule and our workflow/tasks, so everybody was thrown off of their routine. Keep in mind that a lot of these people are not very well off and need this job. He wanted yes men working for him. We had this worker Bob who had these real thick glasses. Bob was not financially secure at all. Bob struggled, and while he may not have been the best worker, he was a hard worker and would go to the ends of the earth for you. Bob hit his head on a light by the loading dock at one point, and one of the lenses in his thick glasses fell out and underneath the ramp of the dock. Bob immediately started to freak out because he could barely afford to live, much less a new pair of glasses. Bad manager comes running in and yells at the kid for being so clumsy. He starts poking around with a yardstick under the ramp to find the lens and won't hear any suggestions from anybody. Bob is begging anybody to just reach under and grab it. This is mildly unsafe, but if the ramp is propped up it would be fine. Bad manager tells Bob that it's absolutely unsafe for him to work and Bob has to go clock out. Bob doesn't have a ride home. Bob is nearly in tears by now because he needs the hours. Keep in mind he still can see out of one eye. Manager says go clock out. You can sit in the break room or in the parking lot, but you can't be here working. I offered to help get the lens out after watching the bad manager try to scrape it out with a yardstick. Bad manager yelled at me and started a timer on his watch. He says if I don't figure this out in 20 minutes, too faking bad, he'll just be shit out of luck. If anybody sits back here and tries to help me, I'm firing them. I am absolutely floored at this point. Bad manager fails miserably at trying to get this lens out. Meanwhile, I went and told my direct supervisor what was going on. After the BM's 20-minute timer ran out, my sub and I ran over, propped up the ramp, and recovered the lens in about 20 seconds. I took it out to the parking lot and called for Bob. He came literally sprinting up to me and gave me a big bear hug and thanked me, still borderline in tears. Bad manager didn't give a fuck about this guy. I didn't need the job as bad as he did, so I put my eyes on the line and got him his lens back. Walmart management, in my experience, from storeism, psychos, up to market HR/market manager, does not give a fuck about their employees. You only get a voice if you kisses or if you spend over 10 years with the company. Bob still thanks me for helping him out a year ago this coming month. I cannot honestly recommend that anybody work there in the cap 2 position unless they absolutely need a job. Was an electronics associate a little after Black Friday. My old store was a high theft area, so a lot was locked up, and guy asks to see a TV that was on a stack base. I show him it and tell him some specs about it, and he seemed interested and said he wanted it, so I told him I was gonna go to the back to get the one he wanted, but he said no, I want this one right here, so I went ahead and unlocked the spider app around it, and I was originally going to bring it to the counter to ring him up, but he helped me pick it up, 65 inch, and proceeds to tug it and put it in his cart and slowly began walking away. I tell him that I have to ring it up at the electronics counter. App manager at the time was on ours that if you needed to unlock it then take it to the register and don't hand them it, and he proceeds to tell me that no he don't and walks away. Immediately I knew he probably was gonna try to steal it, so I walk up to him and tell him again, but says him being racist. Usually when they say something along this line, I already know what's about to go down. So I go tell my manager to tell app that the customer does not want to pay at the counter and he is acting a little sus. Me and my manager walk back up to him and tell him once again that app was coming and that he needed to pay at the counter, and he then looks dead into my soul and tells me he has a gun and if I keep faking with him he will pull it out and pistol whip me. I've seen my fair share of crazy shit happen at Wally World, but being threatened with a gun was my first lol. Manager that was with me was speechless, but immediately told app the situation, so they were posted up at every single exits and police is called. Guy then attempts to make a dash at the grocery doors, but gang of Walmart workers are already there and grab the TV, and guy is trying to fight everyone but runs out the door when he realizes that he ain't getting that TV. We see him jump into a white truck that was posted up right in front of the doors and we never see him again. It's safe to say that he probably didn't have a gun with him that day, but nevertheless a crazy day. Undoubtedly the worst thing I have seen happen tonight. 2 women came into the store. One was pregnant and had her 3-year-old son with her. They tried to steal about $1,000 worth of baby formula. Drug addicts will sell it to buy drugs. After we catch them and take them back to the security room, the little boy has to go to the bathroom, so we allow his mom to take him, and she just starts screaming at him for no reason at the top of her lungs. Once the police arrived we discovered that she actually had 2 more kids, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, that she had left in the car. The car was off the whole time in the summer heat. We find the car and see these 2 kids aren't even in car seats, just buckled up. The mom refuses to give us the keys to get them out, so we had to call in the fire department to get them out and an ambulance to make sure they were okay. This whole time we can tell the women are strung out on some kind of drug because they are both just laughing the whole time and don't seem to grasp what is going on. Keep in mind one of them was quite obviously pregnant at the time. Meanwhile the kids are all terrified and crying because they have no idea what is going on and don't understand why they are being taken from their mom. Needless to say, Child Protective Services was called in to take the kids. After they got the all clear from the EMTs, the women were hauled off in a police cruiser and the kids were taken away in a van by CPS. I'm not sure what happened to the kids, but I sure hope they never end up back with those awful women again. Does JCPenney count? I worked in the shoe department. We were a few feet away from the hair salon. Whenever someone got a perm it smelled like shit. Burnt hair basically. It was nauseating. Anyway, one night, when the salon is closed, this guy and what seems to be his daughter come in looking for shoes. I've never seen feet so grotesque before. They were bloated and black and green and oozing pus. I hadn't known what diabetes was back then, but it was clearly an out of control case of gangrene. Looking back on it, it smelled like death. Very close to the burned hair smell of the salon, really, but somehow even worse. You could smell it from a dozen feet away. They insisted on trying shoes. The largest we carried was a 13E, which was clearly too small for him. He wanted to try the shoes on without socks, So I tried to get him to put on some pads at least, little nylon footers. He tried, but couldn't reach to get them around his foot. His daughter got angry at me for not putting them on him. I was not going anywhere near his dead feet. He tried to get some shoes on. It failed miserably. I made myself scarce. Finally they left, and I post-backed all of the shoes he tried on, now stained with oozing pus, as defective/damaged goods for a few weeks after. Every time the salon did a perm, I had vivid flashbacks to this guy and his gross feet. Eventually I quit the job, because I couldn't handle that anymore. This was 20 years ago. I still can't stand the sight of feet. Foot fetishes are quite frankly disgusting to me. I'm literally scared from this. Worked at Walmart for about 2 years. So I saw some faked up sheet. For starters, I was in the bathroom one day taking a dump and heard someone come in to check both stalls, and after realizing both were occupied he decided to just sheet in the sink. I was in the stall when he did this, so I just heard the horrible sound of explosive diarrhea. But then I saw he not only covered the sink, but it was all over the floor and some even got on the mirror. It was gnarly. It was funny as fact telling my manager that someone sheet in the sink, but I felt bad for the maintenance dude who had to clean it. Other highlights from my time there: guy in produce, came into work drunk, threw up and burst in the produce cooler. Wasn't fired. New pallet of meat wasn't put away in the freezer and no one noticed it for hours. And when they did, it was just put in the freezer. New guy needs to get a pallet of TVs down off the steel racks because a customer is buying one. Instead of asking someone who was certified, he tried to use the forklift himself. He managed to drop 6 to 7 TVs from 20 plus feet. Each one was around $700. Dude immediately left and never came back. Lol. A guy on one of the store scooters came up to me asking for help. When he was telling me what he needed, he ripped a couple nasty fatchets and then sheet his pants. Never stopped talking and never broke eye contact. Then kept talking for the longest couple minutes of my life. Having to pretend like I didn't notice, and the horrible smell. He didn't even go to the bathroom after. He just went right back to shopping. All this happens in southwestern Val, so throw in a cliche southern accent to everything. Had a woman at the end if my shift smoking a cigarette. I asked her to put it out. She gets angry, says it's a free country and runs off. Another customer comes up to me a few minutes later and says a woman is leaned over and looks sick in the shoes department. I go check on the problem. The cigarette lady is there bent over those little seats you sit on to try on shoes. Kneeling on the floor, white powder on her nose. She looks at me, vomits a mix of bile, powder, and what smelled like a 3-day-old Taco Bell, then takes off like a wild animal. My replacement shows up. I have a mop in hand ready to go and just push it into his, and I'm like, good luck. On my way out of the store, I see some of the cashiers are freaking out. I go over and the cops come out of the lady's bathroom as I get close. Cigarette lady is fighting and cussing between 2 officers. One of the managers comes out next with a can of compressed air, a 6-pack of beer, and a pack of washcloths. I found out later she was jacked up on a few things and luckily did get some much needed help after a good mental health checkup. TLDR, lady smokes in Walmart, snorts some unknown white powder, and throws up in the shoe department, runs away, steals beer, compressed air, and huffs her way into a night in jail and a mental evaluation. Obligatory not a Walmart, but I worked at Kroger for 9 years. But let me do a recap. Had a pimp have a stroke on my doorstep. Had to call paramedics because his women were panicking. Got mauled, read, kisses, by a black lab. Only reason why it's worse is because I had a phobia of big dogs. Had a man slam his mentally handicapped child into the service desk because I couldn't find the guy's woo order. CPS was called since we had the guy's info. A 14 to 15-year-old girl ran away from home. The people she was with left her at the store at 11 p.m. We called her family. A 36-year-old woman was left by her husband at our store at around 7. She lived about 3 hours away in the next city. Over a woman threw a pen at my co-worker because it was Thanksgiving and we closed the service desk at 11 a.m. Lost prevention. Arrested a woman who had a meltdown after stealing $300 worth of Macup. She peed in the manager's chair. We had to replace it. Old lady told her daughter she was going to wait in the car while she shopped. Her daughter found her dead in the car. Co-worker passed out on shift. Turns out he tried to add on painkillers. They got him to an errand time. A car caught fire in the parking lot. While I was redirecting people, a man told me to watch his kids while he ran to move his car. He was parked next to the burning car. Our deli has caught fire 5 times. It has gotten to the point that the workers just shrug and work around it. Walked into the bathroom handicap stall and found it covered in blood. Not only the toilet, but the floor and walls. I informed the utility lady and she sighed and said in Spanish again. Before getting bleached, lady checked out at my line dry. She left wet. Turns out she chose that time to piss blood and soak her pants. We had to deep clean the spot. Had a ceiling collapse at dairy during a rainstorm. Security has rescued about 10 bats. Guy threw stolen items at my manager. She may be old, but she can matrix dodge. Had a supervisor hold my manager back after a customer decided to chew me out using racial slurs. She wanted to rip that customer a new one with her fist. I don't blame her. My manager's water broke while on duty. She was a trooper and medics and husband were there within minutes. Edit, spelling and grammar. Third shifter here. I work overnight at a person to that. While not a horrible store, it's also not in the greatest of areas, so I've got a few I could tell you about. Point most recently, I was stocking in our pet department. I know all stores are different in layout. Our pet department is in the back next to electronics and the photo lab, which also happens to be where the back bathrooms and the family restroom are. Well, I saw a couple go into our family restroom, which is fairly normal in case one or the other needs help with something. I don't know a person's story or personal issues and it's not my job to ask, so I go about restocking everything with my coworker. After 15 minutes of them being in the bathroom, my coworker and I joke how they were either humping or shooting up. I decided to walk up to the door and knock, claiming I was our maintenance crew and we had to clean the bathroom, so they had to hurry up. They said they were almost done, so I walked away. Another 5 minutes later the couple walks out finally and walks away like nothing happened. Being the curious employee that I am, I go to the restroom to check to see if they were opening packages and stealing or whatever. When I opened the door, there was blood all over the floor, sprayed up the wall, and smeared in the sink where it looked like they tried to clean up at least the sink. I looked in the trash, using a glove, because God knows what is in there, and risking fentanyl contact. This is in Ohio, so you probably know how expansive the drug problem is in this state, and when I turned over what ended up being a spoon, there was what I assumed. I interrupted them using. They also left their restraint on the floor behind the toilet. At that point I called in my manager, who had to call the cops in by company policy when drugs are found, and I was made to block the family bathroom so no one would go in. Cops checked the bathroom, and between the rest of the trash can and the little feminine hygiene trash thing by the toilet, they found a total of 3 syringes used, a pack of our spoons they took off the shelf to cook with, and a tiny baggie of heroin. Nothing really happened beyond that, and the cops took what they found to destroy it, and our actual maintenance people came in to clean and sanitize the bathroom. Point, like I said, I live in central Ohio and a lot of my area has a slight drug problem and assumes that Walmart bathrooms are apparently the safe place to sue their stuff. TLDR, people getting wasted in bathrooms and causing a biohazard issue too. I've personally had my life threatened by people because I tell them they can't ride the bikes and skateboards in the store. We are talking grown as adults in their mid to late 30s trying to ride stuff like tricycles. People always gotta try to act like hard asses when they get busted for knowing they were in the wrong. Especially in front of their normally cracked out baby mamas. 3. Not seen by me directly, but heard about a Black Friday one year where a guy punched a kid that had to be in his teens over an XBOX. A faking XBOX man. It's not that important. 4. Had a couple of thieves get busted stealing at our self-checkouts. When they realized they were busted, they tried to run out the door, pushing our elderly door greeter over. Luckily she was okay. It ended up totaling around $1,000 worth of stuff. We run training receipts to get a total of the attempted theft. I could understand if it was some food and they didn't have enough for home for kids or something like that, but it wasn't even stuff that they would actually need. I think there was like $300-400 worth of Mac-Up, and then a few external hard drives and a couple high-end scientific calculators. 5. In relation to the last one, in the way of thieves, I've watched and helped stop a guy that took some stuff from our electronics department and stuffed it under a baby before trying to leave. The mother claimed to not know the guy was doing that, but they were all some of our regulars. I had to file a police report since I was involved. Went to court and he didn't show. Got subpoenaed again and he pled guilty to the felony theft while also pleading guilty to the charge he got picked up on that got him to be pulled to court. Last I heard, he's still in there. Apologies for formatting and such. First time posting here. Feel free to correct me if I messed anything up. For me, it'd have to be between the story I'm about to share and the one time I saw a person being carted out by EMTs just as my shift began. I never found out what happened with that incident, so I don't think it'd count in this instance. I work at the pharmacy at my local Walmart in southwestern Ontario, mostly operating the cash register, stocking shelves, getting people their prescriptions, and helping them find stuff that they're looking for. Most of the customers I deal with are elderly people, and while most of them range from very nice to agreeable, there can be some curmudgeonly ones as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that the Walmart I work at employs a lot of Indians, as in the country in Asia, not indigenous. By my own estimate, I'd say that at least 80% of the people who work at this place are Indian, and they all speak with very thick accents that can sometimes be difficult to understand. Even so, I always make sure I conduct myself with the utmost respect and decorum, no matter the situation, and no matter the person. One day, I'm multitasking between stocking shelves and manning the register, and this elderly man with oxygen tubes sticking up his nose rolls in on one of those scooter carts that they keep up at the entrance. He asks where something is, I forget what it is he wanted, and, as usual, I tell him. He thanks me and says, straight up and completely unironically, that I'm the first non-Paki he's seen at this store all day, and that he's glad to have found a white person to help him. It took most of my willpower to keep it together and not tell this guy just how racist he sounded. Instead, I kept a straight face, promptly wished this person a good day, and got back to my work. So yeah, that's my Walmart story. I guess you could say I'm thankful that, after about 19 months of working at that place, this is the worst thing I've seen. I'm not a Walmart employee but a customer. My friends and I went to go pick up some house paint to paint my friend's room, and were pretty excited. All went smoothly, and the employee in the paint section was very nice. We made small talk while waiting. We all went back to the car, paint buckets in hand. I was sitting in the back seat with one when we made a turn and the paint lid came off and spilled everywhere. What's ironic about this is that, before even getting the paint, I said I swear, if I get one drop of paint on me, I'm going to be so pissed. Then an hour later a whole bucket of house paint spilled all over the car interior and my brand new Victoria's Secret leggings. I went and covered in paint and the guy just asked, what happened? I explained and he just looked at me like I was stupid. The manager didn't even know what to do until I told them to help me clean it off. What dumbasses. They thought I was the one who pried the lid off, because there's no way a Walmart employee could do anything wrong. My leggings were then thrown away because the paint never came out, and my friend's mom forced Walmart to pay for cleaning out friend's car. It's a famous story now at Walmart, and with my friend's TLDR, Walmart employee never hammered paint lid closed, spilled everywhere in car and on me. Walmart employees were dumbfounded. Short list. Feces filled frying pan found in the middle of home goods section. Shelf shifted in the food section spilling. Shelves of glass jars of pasta sauce, gravy, and soups. Heard the crash from across the store. Nothing on camera. No witnesses. Kid bouncing rubber ball against a 60-inch flat screen, cracking the screen. Parents left before it was realized by staff. Customer stripping naked in a blind spot in the clothing section trying to get themselves a free pair of jeans and shirt. This one was only noticed because they've done it before, and asset protection was paying attention. Pallet of dairy, milk, and juice left in the middle of the aisle for a few hours. Employee who was stalking that morning was called to the cashier and was left being a cashier for those hours. to cover breaks, frozen foods often being left in strange places and no longer being frozen once found. Store was being run well below a skeleton crew. Store manager was intentionally holding back on hours and hiring vacated positions to boost their own bonus. At one point, aside from cashiers, it was down to 7 sales employees, 2 in electronics, 1 in home and garden, 2 for housewares, 2 for apparel, 1 who was required for manning jewelry and change room, no evening employees other than cashiers and their 1 person in app, and 3 people to unload the trucks. Oh, several things, but it depends on what you mean by the worst thing. First and foremost was a coworker. Lazy piece of shit, never did anything except try to get me fired on the regular. I was doing half his work on top of my already overloaded tasks, had the evidence to prove it, because everything we did was logged into the computer system or caught on camera, yet somehow I never did my job and just stood around. On a more serious note, the deli can be a pretty disgusting place. Only the bare minimum of pest deterrent devices, sometimes positioned in places where food is handled below them, food not getting rotated as often as it should, especially from the hot foods line. I had a customer demand I give her a rotisserie chicken. I pulled off the line. I told her, "I'm sorry miss, I can't do that. It's no good anymore." Pointed to the label noting the time it was packaged, about 2 hours past when it should have been pulled from under the heat lamp, and said, "See, after 4 hours, we can't legally sell it to you. It'd be unsafe." She was relentless. A manager got involved. I lost that argument. I'd feel angry about that, but if that woman managed to choke down that desiccated mass of chicken flavored leather, she already received a punishment worse than anything I could deliver. I worked for Wally World several years back for about 3 years. Luckily nothing big happened there, like people cheating on the floors though. Found a better fish, still alive thankfully, in the freezer. Had a drunk guy beach that there weren't any fresh tortillas at like 5 AM, 30 minutes before the vendor showed up. But there were lots of other great stories and some not so great. Point had a married assistant manager sleep with one of his cashiers and got her pregnant. Point I and a bunch of others started at a new store setting it up overnights. That is fun. No customers, just bullshitting and hanging merch. If it paid well enough, and I was in a fun crew, I might actually consider that for a career. Anyways, we had a lush that joined as a stoker, but always reeked of alcohol. So they moved him to maintenance after the store opened to try and keep him away from customers. The same AM from above would send him outside to sweep the parking lot if he reeked of booze too badly in the middle of a cold as winter. Dude was happy to do it. The lush finally got fired. So I'm in the back one night and the AM comes to me and he says he was out clearing some stacks of pallets out back and found some cases of beer stashed away. I just laughed and told him they were the lushes. He just replied with, "I figured something was up. I've never seen a guy so happy to sweep the parking lot when it was freezing outside." 2 co-workers hooked up for a while. She got pregnant. A few weeks in, I guess her mother talked her into getting an abortion and breaking up with the other co-worker. Dude was devastated as he was actually excited to be a dad. She quits, or whatever. A few months later, he gets shot. Some say suicide, some say it was another co-worker that was trying to hook up with the same girl. I have no idea which is true. The big evidence, I guess, is he was shot in the right temple and he was left-handed. It is still very sad. A lot of kids worked there, but I liked him. Though he was pretty bright and might actually turn out to be a decent human being. Point had a coworker that was engaged that actively tried to hook up with other women while working in electronics. His girlfriend was pretty, smart, and on track for a good career. Dude was a freaking moron. So as I said, a brand new store employed some new tech at the time where the customer would write the check, the cashier would run it through the machine, and it would be processed, and they'd hand the check back to the customer as part of their receipt. Yeah, as you guessed, that didn't work right. So for the first few days, those machines didn't work. So we had no way of getting the lost money because we didn't have the checks to process. Not sure how much we lost, but if you've ever seen how stupid people are when a new Wally World opens, even when it's like the third in town, people spend some stupid money, TV, stereos, etc. Back then, laptops weren't locked down. Guy took a laptop, went to Housewares, opened a toaster oven, put the oven on the shelf like a display, put the laptop in the box, and used tape off the shelf from stationery to tape it back up. Bought a new laptop for the price of a cheap toaster oven. Had someone buy a treehouse and return it. Once they got the box in the back and were processing returns, they found it didn't have any of the wood, etc. It was just filled with sand. Had people walk out with stuff like TVS held over their heads as that put it above the sensors and just walk out the door without the alarms going off. They had to lock the door to the compactor because someone was throwing merchandise through it, then after shift going outside and crawling in from outside to retrieve what they threw out. A few years after I left, early one morning during morning shift change, when there are few people on the floor, had a team of thieves come in. One distracted the person in electronics. Another one got a pry bar from hardware and busted into the PlayStation and Xbox cabinet, throwing as many as they could in a cart. Then they ran out the GM side, non-grocery, as that door hadn't been unlocked for the day from overnights yet. Those doors are designed to just bust out if hit hard enough for emergencies, etc. They bust through, throw that sheet in a truck and take off. Forgot how many systems they got away with. Again after I left, an employee was eating and drinking people's food in the fridges during the overpass shift. One guy gets upset, takes an empty Gatorade bottle, peels the label, and writes his name in big black letters on it. Fill that thing up with antifreeze, since it has a sweet taste. Left it in the fridge. Thief drank it, got sick, and went to the hospital. Didn't do anything to the guy that put the bottle in there, as there were technically no rules on what people could put in the fridge, and the label was removed and his name clearly on it. I don't miss the work or the customers, but I've never worked with a more fun bunch of people than I did in that first crew that started at that store, and the best ones were the smokers. I don't smoke, but during breaks and lunch I'd be in the smokers break room because whatever we were discussing was always funny. The non-smokers were just kind of meh. We'd be laughing our asses off all break, come out, and the non-smokers and just cheating around drinking tea, enjoying the quiet, I guess. Said this in a previous thread. Older gentleman didn't make it in time and smeared poo all the way to the bathroom. Just a line of poo up to the bathroom from the registers. Don't have to say how the stall looked. Also, seeing a lady repeatedly going into the family bathroom to huff herself unconscious, get taken to the hospital across the street, break out to return just to repeat. She did this 3 times in one day, I think. What takes the cake as not necessarily the worst sight, but knowing what could have happened, was a man hunting for our grocery DM. Apparently she had a secret admirer and guy would drop chocolates and flowers off, basically stalking her at times. I guess one day he actually asked her out, but she denied because she was dating someone. Alright, he never returned. A few weeks later, one of our produce associates was getting let out back to dispose of the bad produce, and the stalker man was waiting right by the door with a faking machete. Tells everyone in the back room to GTFO. Then he begins searching for grocery DM. Luckily, she was off that day. Man starts going haywire, but luckily everyone got escorted out very quickly. Police came, and shots were fired in the back of the store. Hit the guy I think twice in his abdomen. Had that guy been a touch crazier, who knows how much bloodier it could have been. Wow. Finally I can write. I've been there for about 3 months at my local neighborhood market, and can say out of the short time I've been there I've seen some weird and gross things being maintenance I have to clean up under the cases of the cold meat areas and produce. With this you will see things like bugs and mold that will get found in there. Also it contains meat that will get stuck under the plastic that holds the meat on the shelf and smell terrible. On the weird side I have 2 stories. My first story is when this group of about 4 to 5 people came in and ultimately started filming with fur coats on and wearing nothing but lingerie/bikinis, while simultaneously lip singing. One was in the cart while someone else was pushing one of the girls. The guy was filming. When asked why they were doing this, they said, "Oh, we are shooting a music video." We asked them to leave unless they are buying stuff. So they did. Next happened recently when some creepy woman started bawling her eyes out when coming into the store, saying these guys were being assholes and saying I almost hit them. Being the nice guy I was, took sympathy and talked to her while working. Basically said everything is fine and she will be fine. Well, she ends up checking out and starts yelling at my buddy who's a cashier for telling her she can't have a dog in her cart. She calls him and as whole AMD walks out. Regardless, I turn around, put on one earbud and start working. Next thing you know, she's standing right behind me staring at me. Being startled, I ask, "Is there something you need?" She said no. Are you married? Would have been normal if I was older, but just 21, and she's 50-ish. But I said no out of stardom and asked, "Can I get your number?" I was so starstruck all I could say, "I'm sorry, I'm not looking for anything." She got so pissed and stomped out of the store. After a week, I think she came back in, but she said nothing and left me alone. I used to work lawn and garden, and the only thing I can think of that really stands out was more sad than bad. An old lady pulls up right to the curb in front of the gate, parks, and comes in and starts asking about hanging flower baskets. Parked on the curb in a fire lane. She goes straight to my manager to start asking about a hanging flower basket, and right away you could just tell she wasn't in a good state of mind. Kept focusing and unfocusing on my manager's face, stopped talking randomly, and couldn't seem to keep track of the conversation. Eventually she picks out a basket of flowers and tries to go back to her car. Manager reminds her she has to pay for them and gently walks her to the register. Takes a few tries for her to remember how her credit card worked, but she buys the flowers at this point. We've all noticed her, and we're all really concerned. I don't know if she had some sort of disease or medication was messing with her or what, but we were all really worried about her just leaving alone. When she gets to her car, she slowly pulls away and starts swerving at around 3 miles per hour to the exit. She actually bumped into the guardrail at the edge of the parking lot, and by this point we had had enough. My coworker and I both called the police. She got through to them first, and they sent out a patrol car to check on her. But by this point she had actually gotten out of the parking lot and onto the main road, so I don't know how it ended. I like to imagine the cops gently pulled her over and called her caretaker to come get her, and everyone ended up fine, but I don't know that for sure, and it still makes me sad that I don't know how that ended. Once had 2 kids whose mom didn't care to pay attention to them and let them run around the store, steal a lighter, and set a few skirts in the women's department on fire. Thankfully, the fire was small, but everyone was rushed out. Some customers were mad and wanted to finish their transactions and were told no and booted out of the store by security. One person left through the garden exit where I was working by, and one of my managers told me to stop them as they ran by me. I didn't, in case they tried to run me down with the cart full of stolen goods they had, which had already happened once before. Thankfully a veteran was with me talking about his war stories, and chased after the would-be thief and brought their stolen product back to me, which was worth nearly $5,000 of clothes and electronics, and they had a few game consoles and computers in there, and I was able to turn it in back to management. It then became my job to turn any potential customers away at the door, something I had done often because I was usually there for closing. After about 2 hours of doing that and lining up any carts out in the parking lot, as pushing them was my job, we were sent home an hour before my shift had ended, and I thought I would end up working the last few hours for free since I couldn't clock out. Turns out the district manager had made a deal with corporate, and every employee who was there was given what they were owed for the night and an extra $100 for handling the situation so well and keeping people from taking advantage of the situation, and for any potential emotional stress. That veteran basically got me my full pay plus more by being a good person. Sadly, he never came back, and the woman who left her kids to do whatever that caused the fire was never identified, so they got away with it, and the store had to claim some BS so that corporate could cover it up and keep the store from getting in trouble, which felt weird to me. It wasn't the only cover up that happened at the store while I worked there, but it was the strangest. I'm a cashier, so I deal with a bunch of crazy things daily. The worst I have seen goes as follows. You have to be 19 to sell alcohol. Makes no sense to me, but whatever. I'm 18. I've had people go off on me and get pissed for looking old enough and having to call over a manager to scan their alcohol, even going as far as trying to scan it themselves. It will cause my screen to lock up, making the wait even longer. Like Karen, I'm sure that waiting 5 minutes for my manager to scan your boxed wine will not ruin your entire life. Point not seen but heard. I was on register one time that was right next to bathrooms in the front. I was scanning a woman's groceries when I saw a woman with a completely full cart standing outside the restroom. Then I heard violent retching sounds in the women's restroom. I kid you not, it lasted for about 10 minutes. Then I see a woman walk out to the one who was standing outside the restroom. I assume they must have been friends or something. The puke lady just smiles at her friend, and they proceed to walk to Subway, get a foot-long apiece, and walk out of the store smiling and laughing like nothing happened. I could smell the vomit at my register. Disgusting. People who come through my line with chicken from the deli, that was clearly the first thing they got, because it's dripping chicken juice, and smells like a musty vagina. Especially when they have full carts and it's the first thing they hand me. Point it's always frustrating when people just set the stuff they decide they don't want down on different shelves, and don't tell an associate. Like, we are happy to put stuff away for you. At least I am. I like to keep my lane neat and tidy, and when you leave your frozen goods sitting next to the Hershey bars, because you decide you're not in the mood for Ben & Jerry's, it's very annoying. People who let their kids push the bag carousel when I'm trying to put their stuff in bags, and then get mad at me when I can't get their stuff in bags. People who are rude to their cashier because they waited in a long line, even if there is a very obviously a much shorter line in the next lane over, just to name a few. Also, at least at my store, I've noticed that people who use government benefits are usually much nicer than people with nice designer clothes. Cest larvae.